there's no Assassin's Creed that's hated quite like Valhalla. People who loved Odyssey didn't like it as much as Odyssey because it didn't do what Odyssey did well. People who loved what Odyssey spat on hated Valhalla even more because Valhalla lied. It promised to hold the core of Assassin's Creed so much closer to heart, and it lied. The stealth didn't work. Enemies would see you through walls, enemies would see you instantly, or they wouldn't see you at all. And for the first 2 years, random dates with stuff like that was just what you had to tolerate. The stealth is now somewhat less broken, but not much has changed because the biggest problems weren't actually the bugs. Valhalla wants you to be able to use stealth as an effective tool. Movement is silent, enemies have poor peripheral vision, and they're easily fooled. The classic characteristics of a stealth system that wants to make killing quick and easy. Valhalla also guarantees one-hit kills, which, sounds like the bare minimum, but it was a big deal coming off Odyssey. What Valhalla doesn't want is for stealth to function as a primary form of play, so Ubisoft do what they can to make it likely that stealth will break. Enemies are often organized in such a way that can't enjoyably be dealt with given the tools at hand. And most importantly, it's remarkably difficult to recover from mistakes. If a detection gauge starts filling, you often don't have enough time to stop it from filling. And when it has filled, you lack the means to shut that problem down, because it wants things to spiral out of control. It doesn't want stealth to last. And the best part is, after a while with it, I didn't want it to last either. Valhalla's stealth is boring. Valhalla's abilities are distributed throughout the open world, found as books of knowledge, the same way you'd find a chest. But from the player's perspective, that makes them functionally random, which means there's simply no guarantee you'll have a stealth moveset. The smoke bomb is literally in a different country, in a DLC campaign that you might not have and probably won't do, and it can't even be relied upon to work properly. The level design is fine. It's better than fine twice. This game is 80 hours long, which is also why it would have been nice to have more than a small handful of kill animations, or for them not to be excruciatingly slow. Valhalla brings back social stealth. It bragged about that. Somehow, it turned out even worse. Saxon cities and townships are distrust areas, where the idea is not to draw attention to yourself. Unfortunately, what not drawing attention to yourself actually means is walking really, really slowly. On keyboard, you have no fine control over your movement speed, so your choices are too slow to get away or too fast to avoid detection. Most opportunities for blending are static, a bench or a task you can pretend to be doing, but that would only be useful if the enemies you're trying to avoid weren't also static. Guess what, you guys? Now, some enemies move. Problem in that case is that blending is the least efficient response when turning your back or leaving are still on the table. Social stealth is boring and impractical, so I stopped doing it. For me, stealth of either kind had become a brief and a half-hearted prelude to the real gameplay, a roar and a flurry of silver. And then came the questions about why the Assassins and Templars were a subplot, or why you couldn't even choose to equip your hood when you wanted to for the first 2 years. Assassin's Creed? Question mark? I get it. Why people hated this game, why many still do. They had every right to be frustrated by a game named for an experience it wasn't interested in providing, and marketing that pretended otherwise. But the truth is, I've also gotten over it. Of all the feelings that can stick to a game, disappointment is one that tends to ease the most with time. So you want to be a Viking game, Valhalla? Open world, narrative driven? Alright. I went in understanding why some would never forgive it, but willing to accept Valhalla for what it is, instead of what it isn't. And you know what? There was one part of Assassin's Creed for whom no goodbyes were needed. Assassin-ness was all but gone, but not Ubisoft's love for making art and beauty from the ancient world. You want someone to blame for this video? Blame YouTube Autoplay for randomly selecting Out of the North. Blame them. Sarah Schachner and Jesper Kyd write good music, but what sets her apart from the average video game composer, and what has made him one of my favorite creators of music in anything, is sound design. The character of the sounds themselves, and the ability of those sounds to characterize the world. Jesper used instruments some centuries old, some used by the actual Vikings, but he also changed his approach, from the cities being the center of the score to the gods, because Valhalla's real setting is the natural world, and what's made by us is so small in its wake. As I ride up to a seer's hut with the cosmic ripples twinkling above, quiet wind and snow crunching, the music is pensive and ethereal. The sounds are old, but also alien in a way that brings about the presence of something higher. The music makes you understand what Eivor would have seen when he looked at the aurora, or why people would have fought and died to claim the lands of Britain, besides the abundance of turnips. But of course, the landscapes help too. You don't need me to tell you that Valhalla is beautiful. England is beautiful, and Ubisoft remembers it with exceptional clarity. But it's not all about telling the truth. England is an exaggeration, real but retold, where the trees are a little more severe, meadows are a little more idyllic, hills are taller, valleys are lower, and both are closer together. Valhalla loves to lie, as much as it can without shattering the illusion of the truth. That is, unless you know better. There are castles centuries too early, aqueducts and ruins centuries too late. For some, that's a nitpick, but for others, it's too far. Its liberty scratched at the Assassin's Creed fantasy of being a portal into the past. But one result of the game's attempts to lie with care is that Valhalla has an atmosphere. Its world has the strongest emotional direction since Unity's leap toward graphical realism made that so much harder to achieve. It's hard to be a photograph and a painting at the same time. You can't look this real and be as artistically free as Assassin's Creed 2. But Valhalla paints where it can from within the truth, with music, with deliberate color grading, with drama in the skies, clouds and a sentimental sun, with a new weather system that summons fog or rain where it counts. Valhalla's plants have an emotional direction. The game can be true and yet divine, or dreadful, or alien, untamed. It can be so many things. Valhalla, with its bolder art direction, its moving weather, and its willingness to realize all 4 seasons in different parts of the country, is the most varied of Ubisoft's new expanses. Clouds like mountains, black and furious, soft and painted, fog that brings ghosts to forests or vampires to towns, sunsets, pink or gold like stepping into a twilight realm between earth and heaven, and the silent north, home to nothing, apart from the wind and the stubbornest bark. I realize this might sound a little hyperbolic, but I've had a lot of time to think about it. Valhalla isn't just one of the most beautiful games I've ever played. It was 5 of them. When I started, I wasn't sure how much that could or should mean. I knew that it made me feel deeply. I knew that it made me care about everything it spoke for. I knew that I was never bored when I traveled, and considering the size of England, let alone the size of Valhalla, I knew that was a hell of a thing to say. But I had no final answers. Not yet. I can't talk about what Odin did when he had no final answers, so here's what we're gonna do instead. Now, if you're subscribed to Whitelight, you are of course of the Sigma variety, so it only follows that some of you must be involved in the world of business. How would you like to make your life easier? To simplify day-to-day management from accounting to inventory, to centralize it in one place? That is the premise of Odoo. One of the best things it can do is build a business website, free of charge for the first application, with unlimited hosting and support. There's even a free domain included for a whole year. I use the word business. That does not mean sterile or complicated. Odoo can build you a strong foundation in just 4 steps. As you specify your goals, choose your color palettes, add pages or features, choose your theme. From there, it can be customized comprehensively with templates, drag and drop, a copyright-free database of images, and access to all Google fonts. There's a flexible grid too, which allows you to fluidly lay out and organize your blocks. And if you're running out of inspo, you can always ask the integrated GPT for an assist. It's fast, it's intuitive, and for the first app, it's free. Basically, Odoo does everything. That isn't their tagline, but it should be. Right, Valhalla does make mistakes in the conceiving of its world. Instead of addressing the fact that riding horses in Assassin's Creed is boring and characterless, Valhalla decided to add horse stamina. The simplest contribution is that you sometimes have to go slower. The dumbest contribution is that horse stamina doesn't drain when you're riding on a road, which encourages you to stick to the roads, a small but ever-present incentive not to move according to your own impulses, to see things from a smaller range of perspectives, a pointless and damaging gravity. Perhaps the idea was to help players avoid the sluggish and often frustrating way that England's land and its waters interconnect. There is not the sea and the land in England. Rivers are like arteries woven throughout, but Valhalla's mechanics aren't ready for that level of interconnection. When you find yourself at a riverside, which happens all the time, you can summon your longship with the press of a button, but you can't choose where or in what direction it should be pointing. And let me tell you, be it by curse or by prank, it somehow manages to face the wrong direction 9 times out of fucking 10. So you end up having to swim all the way over and turn its fat ass around, which is annoying enough if you just want to sail down the river. But if you only wanted to cross it, it's a complete waste of time. You might as well have just swam. But your horse can't swim for some reason, so you dismount, swim across yourself, slowly, and then summon it back on the other side, which is stupid as shit, and which could have been addressed if the player was ever informed that your horse actually can swim, if you get the upgrade you never told about from the tab you never told about. Hope you find it early. Never underestimate the power of inconvenience. I barely sailed in Valhalla, for the simple reason that getting in a boat was annoying. But there is more to England than its rivers and lands. There are its towns and cities too. And that means another kind of traversal. Yup, we're gonna have to start talking about the P word. Penis, which pretty much sums up how I feel about the parkour. Parkour is here because Valhalla is technically Assassin's Creed, not because it is spiritually Assassin's Creed. It doesn't even achieve the bar of belonging. Why would Eivor move this way? Why would a Viking? How does this serve Valhalla's fantasy? I had no expectations. So it wasn't much of a disappointment to find careless level design consisting of some ropes and a moveset consisting of go up, go down, or go down to the side. There is no mechanical space for mastery or expression. You can't have fun with parkour in Valhalla. But its truest failure is that it isn't even good at being functional. There is a sprint mechanic. Why? I'm guessing that's between God and the people responsible for horse stamina. So there is a normal run and there is a sprinting run. Some actions during parkour will cancel the sprint, which means you need to accelerate back up to speed. Those actions confer a loss of momentum, a material loss, which is great for making Eivor feel heavy, but not for making parkour feel good. Climbing should feel like progress, it should not be marred by the sense that you've also gone backwards. During the earlier part of the period of acceleration, it's very hard to tell whether you're in the sprint state or you're running normally. And because it's never made clear what kind of things will cancel the sprint, it's also hard to tell whether or not the sprint has been cancelled, which leads to fumbling with false corrections, a constant needless frustration. I'm one with company. You will get stuck in places you shouldn't get stuck. You will miss things you shouldn't have missed. And Ubisoft find another, somehow even more decisive way to kill the flow by having Eivor pause for a moment before each of his jumps. The worst part is that they tried to make you feel heavy in all your movements, your basic movements. Firstly by making you generally slower, crucially by making Eivor less responsive, as if Ubisoft had an input lag slider and they cranked up the dial. He jolts and judders, he needs correcting like a drunk, sometimes it's hard to tell whether he got the message at all. He doesn't feel heavy, he feels like his legs are on 500 ping. To control Eivor is subtly unpleasant in a way that is most noticeable when you return to Odyssey. And it's like you're back in home servers. It's like Cassandra's running away from you. People hadn't considered the possibility that movement could continue to regress from Odyssey. What more could you lose? But this is Ubisoft, the only company in the world where 1,000 devs and $1 million can go towards cooking up a way to break their own legs. Then again, it's hard to be disappointed. What Valhalla really wants to be, what really matters most, is a Viking game. What about that? Well, it makes sense to start with a basic Viking act, raiding monasteries. They make a hell of a first impression. Clunking drums, the storming of the beach, as horns sound, then bells, and the clergy flee. Fantastic. Your crew and your role as leader become relevant when you encounter a door or a chest that requires the force of 2 to open. Another good thing, I thought, you have to behave as part of a crew. The first problem is revealed with time. It's time. It takes an absurd and soon agonizing amount of it for these cooperative actions to complete. Maybe there's a crewmate waiting for you, in which case all you've got to do is sit through the overlong animation. But more often than not, you have to call someone over. And man, you'd think they'd be in a hurry, but I guess someone forgot to listen to their David Goggins podcast. What were they thinking with this shit, man? It'd be a small problem if there was one monastery. Do you know how long this game is? I didn't feel like the leader of a band of brothers. I felt like I was herding sheep. It's not a small problem. I know that, because whenever I avoided a monastery, this was the reason why. The second problem emerges from the fact that the completion of the monasteries is tied to the looting of all its chests, and only that. The battle isn't actually relevant. With time, it'll come to feel irrelevant, and with more time, you'll start to act on that. Indeed, the only enemies worth fighting are those who have any chance of interrupting push day, and it kills it. Firstly, because it means you don't actually have to earn your rewards, but mostly because it completely undermines the fantasy at hand. During the basic Viking act, what will most make me feel like a Viking isn't the presentation, it's the degree to which I can inhabit the role in thought and action. I want to be making short-term decisions, to run on instinct, to charge into the shit and come out smeared in mud, and I want that to matter. For it to be the content, not set dressing for a series of chest opening animations. The same problem afflicts the other kind of raid in Valhalla, castles, where fighting is pointless because they don't stop coming and because the only thing that will actually make progress is following your instructions. You want to feel like a Viking, the scene wants that, but if you allow yourself to inhabit the role, you're doing it wrong. The easier solution would be to do something Valhalla already does, but not here for some reason. Tie loot to enemies. Have a zealot meet you in the courtyard with a chest's worth of resources lodged up his ass. But Ubisoft's solution for monasteries was river raids, a free update, a new mode in a new map with a new idea. What if the rivers were a roguelike? The further you go, the higher the risk. If you die, you lose everything. So do you bank and start again, or press on? It's brilliant. On paper. In practice, I'm not sure Ubisoft knew how to make travel by river risky. Enemies in the forts themselves do gain in number, but before any real risk-reward decision can take place, you will be confronted with a very big problem: your cargo limit. By the time you hit the max of 200 resources, heat hasn't become a serious problem, so what's the choice? Press on for nothing, or bank. It takes 450 resources to upgrade your capacity to 300 resources. That's 2 full runs before you can loot 2 more chests. It takes several runs before river raids can even begin to be interesting, with every resource you gain being put toward that cause. Why would Ubisoft do this? Playtime. Come on, the mask was never on. Now, River Raid's other idea makes an interesting point. You never really did care about your crew beyond their capacity to move to the next chest, so what if they could die? In River Raids, Vikings have a health bar. If they go down, you can heal them with supplies, but if you run out of supplies, or you don't get to them in time, they're Donald Ducked. That means you've got an incentive to protect them, and that brings the focus back to the battles. It's brilliant, on paper. My first run was tense. I almost lost someone who I'd been raiding with for the last 50 hours. And, she was also kinda, hey girl. I saved her, but I couldn't save everyone. Then I learned something. They don't die. They faint. A little time in the Viking ICU and they're back in business. I get it. Valhalla's AI ain't the type to be telling you how many R's there are in strawberry, you know what I'm saying? It's the kind of AI you'll catch setting itself on fire. Can you imagine if I cared about that guy? If that guy's death was permanent? Then there was no more tension. I came to view allies going down as a nuisance, and the incentives to protect them were far outweighed by the incentives to get the present raid over with. So I wouldn't say river raids are a good solution to monasteries. With regards to the chest, they didn't even try. And so they are simply more raids in a game that already had more raids than you could ever motivate yourself to do. Shit, I would have settled for some variety, the lack of which was the next problem with raids, by the way. What change exists is rare and surface level. Quite a disappointment. There's also only one music track. I'll stop now. But this does bring us to the other obvious face of the Viking fantasy, the combat system. The basic depths of the Origins combat model are present and accounted for. You time parries and dodges, enemies gather and change to test your instincts. You manage your abilities, use them carefully. And to complete the generic AAA combat system set, Valhalla gives us a stamina bar to promote a mastery of pacing. You attack and dodge with care. The choice between light and strong attacks matters now. And that could have slowed combat down too much, but it doesn't, because light attacks don't just cost less stamina, they bring stamina back if they connect. The choice between light and strong attacks matters now. You've played this before. When you did, it was probably better. But it's generic because it's popular, and it's popular for a reason. It works. It achieves a passable amount of challenge and depth. It's good combat. Valhalla's upgrade is successful. Another good idea was how it handles the bow. In Origins and Odyssey, the bow was a means of dealing damage from range. Shocking, I know. But what I mean to say is that it was simply a ranged way of doing the same thing melee attacks do. It wasn't that interesting. It wasn't that bow-like either. The fantasy of archery is one of precise lethality, but chipping away at health bars makes it feel like you're beating them to death with a really long brick. Valhalla's solution begins with a defense meter. You can drain someone's defense by parrying, and you can drain it by hitting their weak points with the bow. Drain it all the way, you get a stun attack, and that's usually a one-hit kill. So a crack shot is worth as much as a parry. So killing someone with the bow is a test of precision, not of patience. So melee combat can now be varied by the presence of the bow because it's now worth using the bow as part of melee instead of apart from it. And so the bow feels fucking dope. The tight shot is enormously rewarded. That's exactly how you want archery to feel. You also get the broader tactics of stabilizing enemies to make tight shots easier. Slow-mo airtime is a default ability. Slow-mo slides are an early one. Fuck man, you want to be Legolas? This is your game. The nuance, obviously, is that this is a Viking game and not a Legolas game. The combat's approach to the Viking fantasy is conflicted. Stamina adds an impression of weight to your swings, and from stomps a further Viking crunch. Shields can be broken, smashed apart as if detonated by your fury, and the ability menu is fat with charges, bashes, and slams. There's nothing like watching an enemy charge towards you and charging towards him in response, but at the same time, we have the camera, so withdrawn, damaging the intimacy of combat. The fact that the smartest thing to do when you're underleveled is to use the bow exclusively for its advantages in damage and safety, and then there's your movements, and they're bafflingly frantic character. Dodges look like quick steps but move you like a long jump. Knockback flings armored men like leaves in a hurricane. They're big effects, but big doesn't necessarily mean impactful, because it can also bring about an impression of weightlessness. Combat's got the kind of stupid that Odyssey could work with on account of being a stupid game, but Valhalla needed a groundedness for its tone and a consistent heaviness for its Vikings that simply isn't here. Is this a good combat system? Yes. Is this a good Viking combat system? It's fine. Fine is the best the Viking side of Valhalla gets, and I think one of the biggest reasons that people didn't latch on to Valhalla the same way as previous games is that it fails in the department of fantasy, that desire that underlies and unifies the design and the experience. But what's it for Valhalla? It's no assassin game, it's not that good at being a Viking game. What about that last thing? Something we now take for granted, to the point that it's near invisible, the open world adventure. England is beautiful, but what's it like to explore? Valhalla does a good job of curating the horizon. There's often something interesting in the distance at the peak of a hill, but most of the distance is occluded, which makes the world feel big because you can never see its limits, and establishes the question of what's behind the mountain, and the satisfaction of the reveal. Valhalla has what it takes for exploration to be driven by what you can see, and that's why it's disappointing that it nevertheless went the route of every other by-the-numbers open world to primarily drive exploration with a compass instead. Shining gold icons for ingots, items, and abilities, shining blue for mysteries like the piece of shit alignment puzzles or world events. For the sense of adventure, this is a loss, to be guided through the world by something that isn't part of the world, to be driven less by curiosity or intrinsic impulse, to be driven more by something baser, lower, something that can speak louder than your rational mind, that can compel you to do something even if you don't really want to. And Valhalla is disturbingly invested in making that compass as compelling as possible. Icons are gold and shiny, so they're hard to ignore. It presents you with a literal checklist to engage a player's need for thoroughness. It creates clutter, which compels a player to want to clean the clutter. And you're told how far away each icon is, which makes that icon feel like a destination. It makes you feel, when you're close, that since you're close, you might as well do it. You probably should. I don't have a degree in behavioral science, so I might be wrong, but Ubisoft do. There is an industry science of how to keep people playing, and this is what's in the game. So I'm guessing I'm pretty close to being right. In fact, it can't not be what's in the game. You have detailed UI customization options, but not for the icons, coincidentally. It's no compass or the full compass, and you need the compass to know where to go. You have an exploration mode, an optional mode, explicitly designed to tell you where things are less often, but even it won't remove the icons. That doesn't make sense, unless they were afraid of something. The point is this: the process of exploration is numbingly detached from the world itself, and it's overly driven by a feeling of ought to, instead of a feeling of want to. So sometimes you'll do things you don't really want to do, and if you don't do them, you'll feel bad, because a part of you felt like you kinda should have, because that's the idea. But why wouldn't you want to do those things? Let's look at the content, starting with reward. Now, this archetype of Assassin's Creed was designed to have loot in it, but Valhalla doesn't have loot, because people associated loot with the least liked things about Odyssey: damage sponges and level gates. The benefits are immediate and obvious. You can use weapons you want to use, instead of the ones you have to use. You don't have to stop using a weapon you liked the moment something stronger comes along. Problem is, removing loot without addressing what relies on loot leaves Valhalla with a small amount of things to reward you, and yet even more content that wants to reward you than the games that had loot. So with mysteries, you'll have to settle for XP. In a game where XP doesn't matter because levels don't matter. And as for wealth? Well, now it makes sense why they chose to make abilities something you find instead of something you choose from a menu, even though that significantly damages Valhalla as an RPG by making whether you get a stealth, combat, or ranged ability random instead of intentional. But even though there are lots of abilities and lots of gear, it's nowhere near enough to fill the amount of wealth chests Ubisoft wanted in Valhalla. So most of them are filled with ingots instead. Now this is where we cross into super silly sausage territory. This is where it gets bad. Ingots are how you upgrade the ability of your gear to be upgraded. See those bars? That's how many times you can upgrade. Ingots give you more bars. Now, upgrades are expensive. Iron is a scarce resource, so you need to be really invested in something to want the ability to spend even more iron. How often did that happen? With armor? Never, because I never saw the point in upgrading it, because the stats never seemed to have an impact. With weapons? Rarely. In part because the weapons I wanted to stick with the most, the strongest or rarest, often came with the upgrades pre-installed. Ingots aren't very valuable. Iron is valuable, and yet ingots are what fill the chests. Most chests. The rest of them are filled with gear and abilities, for which there is only a chance you'll like enough to use. Valhalla has a serious rewards problem. So rarely did the satisfaction of opening a chest live up to its golden promise. No chests more so than chests in monasteries, which only reward you with one thing: an intangible upgrade material for building mostly useless houses in Ravensthorpe, represented with a picture of a wooden box, clinically named raw materials. Be Beyond the obvious under-delivering on what a player hopes for from the most well-guarded chests in the game, it is also an undermining of the premise of the basic Viking act, another knife in the gut of Valhalla's central fantasy. Plunder isn't part of what we want from a Spartan, or anything associated with Cleopatran Egypt, but Vikings are raiders, pirates, and thieves. The silver they took from monasteries is on page 1 of their legend. So, in Ubisoft's Viking fantasy, you raid wooden boxes you can use to build a chicken farm. You take ingots of nickel from castles. Ubisoft needed a solution for the hole loot would leave, such as more base items, which makes the remarkable number of more base items in the fucking microtransaction store something of an irritant. For the first period of the game, which to be clear is longer than most games, you open these chests and you feel nothing. Nothing but the small assurance that it was probably a good thing. The small pleasure of clearing that glittering icon away. But you keep getting them. Not all of them, but a fair amount. Because who knows what the balance will be in 20, 40 hours, and because, well, the golden promise is just so convincing. Then those hours pass, and you start to realize you're wasting your time. There's an upside. My rational mind beat the compass. Fuck it, no more ingots. It's cold turkey on jingling keys. But I wasn't really free, because I still needed chests for gear and abilities, and reward was only ever half the problem. It's not fun to get to the chests either. So where do you get them? Camps, forts, encounter spaces. So there'll be some stealth and some combat, but in Valhalla, there's something more. Valhalla decides that every wealth chest needs a puzzle in front of it. Why? We already had to fight for them. To fight more might work if the rewards had risen accordingly, but that didn't happen. Well, maybe the puzzles are good in their own right. That's funny, isn't it? I'm a funny guy, you see. The problem with Valhalla's puzzles is that they take a mediocre idea, do nothing to evolve it, and repeat it 1,000 times. There's a barred door in front of a chest, so you walk round the room, find an opening big enough to shoot through, hit the bar, and walk back round. There's a hole in the roof. That wasn't even interesting the first time. You'll do it 100 times, and every time it will take 100 times more time to execute the solution than it did to know it. There's a breakable wall. What you need is an explosive barrel. Maybe you saw the barrel earlier, but if not, there's no logic to apply, there's no puzzle. You just need to look for it. Might take you 10 seconds, might take you 5 minutes. Either way, the solving part is outsized by the plodding execution 100-fold, and you'll do that 100 times too. Valhalla sees no difference between a puzzle and an inconvenience, moving the only obstacle present away from the only passageway present in the only direction you'll let me move for the 264th time isn't a puzzle, it's an inconvenience. And Ubisoft will string these together. You get to the chest, but there's a lock on it. How'd you find the key? Eagle Vision. Eagle Vision does the solving, you do the walking. So you walk there and what do you find? Another barred door, or another breakable wall, or another slidable cabinet. Because complex puzzle design is when you put a waste of time within a waste of time. A short encounter and a simple reward is the basic unit of activity on which the new Assassin's Creeds are built. It's shallow, but it works. It feels good. Valhalla throws that process into a swamp. Now the gears are clogged and rusting and you leave feeling out of breath. And yes, with time you can quiet the nagging of the compass. You can avoid what you know isn't worth the effort. But to avoid gear and abilities is to opt out of half the game's progression. It is to reject the possibility for combat to evolve. You can't get out of this. I hope you've got a good pair of wellies. You might then wish for respite in the kinds of activities that don't involve a chest, but the lack of a material benefit leaves much of it without a defense. Cursed sights. There's an irritating noise and your screen's smeared in shit and it's going to stay that way until you find a small target and shoot it. And your reward is not having to listen to an irritating noise anymore. Well, what was the point in that? There are perspective puzzles, the first half of which sees you prancing about hoping to find a lead, and then hoping the game's in a good enough mood to accept your answer. There's mushroom trips, where a minor challenge appears, the only weird thing being that it was sudden. None of this is bad, but none of it's really good. And when it doesn't make sense for you to do as the player, besides pleasing the urges of the compass, it becomes more apparent that it also doesn't make sense for Eivor to do, or for Vikings to do. What the fuck is going on? Why are we shooting bricks with bad vibes? Anyone? It barely fits, it isn't fun, and there's no reason to do it. There is good content in England. The Daughters of Larian, daughters of a Dark Lord with the powers of Thor. Excellent boss fights, the spectacle, the challenge. But there are 3, and Valhalla is massive, so you probably won't find any of them. In a world this big, quantity is visibility. Tombs of the Fallen are post-launch puzzle dungeons. Now, puzzles and Valhalla tend to go together like Asmongold and soap, but the time since launch was clearly well spent. They have new ideas, problems for which the answer is not immediately clear, and a structure that follows a time-tested logic, where solving smaller puzzle chambers contributes to the solutions of larger puzzle chambers, making every step forward feel bigger. They get the vibe right too. They can be a little too easy, and they're far too buggy. Inconvenience is one thing, but these are bugs that can convince you that the right solution is wrong. And yet, I came away from these dungeons happy, every time. Unfortunately, there are 4 of them, and they're hidden from the compass, so you probably won't do them either. Quantity is visibility, but instead of finding some way to help with that, Valhalla deliberately hides the best of itself. As for the rest of itself, the last thing Valhalla's got to show you are its world events, side quests but with a new idea. They're already happening when you arrive. Presumably, the intent was to make the world feel more alive, but this intention is almost immediately undermined by the fact that it is almost always a compass icon which attracts you to them. If life is always signaled by an icon, then you know you'll never find it anywhere without that icon. You can't move through England aware of the possibility that you could be surprised. And in this case, is that not what a sense of life would mean? World events are bold, short, and shallow. They're characterized by a lack of hand-holding. You're introduced to a situation and you have to intuit what to do next. The house stinks, so we go inside, we look around, we find boxes that stink, and we realize that we ought to remove them. It's never hard, but having to think within the terms of the situation is novel and immersive, and having to think at all makes them more successful as puzzles than 99% of Valhalla's actual puzzles. World events are fun, but they are bound to a formula that ultimately makes them predictable. You'll never guess their premise, but they will always be short, which is why they will always be shallow, and they will never emotionally affect. They will probably be funny and light-hearted in tone, but they will never reward you with anything besides a chuckle. World events are good and founded on a good concept worth developing, but before the game was a third of the way through, I found myself riding past them because I wasn't interested in the exact same kind of experience for the 65th time, because they had no material benefit, and frankly, because they're just like all the other side content in Valhalla. They make sense not to do. Why would Eivor do this? He's here to secure alliances for the safety of his people. He is on a bound to that task. He is a Viking who will fight to take England from its native population. And though he is not an incurious man, you're expected to quiet or dismiss these things for it to feel right, for Eivor to engage with content premised as frivolous distractions. In fact, why would Eivor engage with England as an open-world adventure at all? I'm not talking about plot holes here, a minor breach in logic. I'm talking about the fundamental conflict of Valhalla's structure with its fiction. I'm talking about the fact that the design of Valhalla's open world demands that you do not think or act as the character you inhabit. It demands that his character, that is otherwise Valhalla's driving force, becomes dormant. And for the experience of the player and the character to be made so distinctly separate, to even be opposed, is deeply unimmersive. The fact that you mentally engage with England as a bush to be plucked of its content berries for no other reason than that the icons, the shape, the genre of the game told you to, is its least immersive quality. It makes you so aware of the fact that you're playing a game, but sometimes the reasons for that are simpler. World events are the main way you interact with the people of England, and world events are usually stupid. If you were to take them seriously, the only rational conclusion would be that the entire country is suffering from a severe case of lead poisoning. But the conclusion you're supposed to come to is, lol, lamau even. It's not useful to England that its ambassadors are its clowns, not to its tone, its believability, or its immersive strength. There are things like the hyperactivity of animals, the fact that you're ambushed by the exact same man seeking the exact same revenge from the exact same bush 20,000 times a playthrough. There's the strange absence of civilian life outside cities and towns, and frankly, there's a little bit of bias too, a little bit of pro-Viking sentiment that strains believability and scratches at the tone. It's the bafflingly consistent kindness and emotional availability of Vikings compared to their Saxon foes, their effortless acceptance of outsiders, their support of gender equality compared to their Saxon foes. But it's also a matter of atmosphere. The Saxons are free to live in the dirt, to be pressed on by the grey weight of their sins. But the Vikings seem to exclusively inhabit havens of natural splendor. The sun shines, snow falls softly, the trees bloom. Jorvik is a Yuletide postcard. Ravensthorpe is almost kitsch. You half expect a Disney princess to rock up with Bambi and the boys. Valhalla's biases are far from absolute, but to whatever degree they can be noticed, they hurt. It hurts immersion, it hurts the Viking fantasy again, but it also harms the purpose of the intrusion. I don't feel more sympathetic to the Vikings. In fact, I feel less sympathetic, for the simple and single reason that they feel less real. So, is Valhalla a good open-world adventure? Visually? Fuck yeah. Mechanically? No, it isn't. Much of it's boring and much of it's pointless, and yet the game conspires to give it a powerful gravity, to plant in you an itch you can't help but scratch. It draws you to the worst of itself, while hiding the best of itself. And you know what? It feels like half of Valhalla was designed somehow unaware of the fact that it was even going to be an open-world adventure. How do you remove loot from a model made for loot, and not have a solution for the hole that would leave? How do you write a game's story without respect for the kind of game it would be? But it's the story that's the smart thing to talk about next. First thing you need to understand is that it just isn't finished. Valhalla is big, and Ubisoft are Ubisoft, so too few resources or too little attention were spread too thin. Take the voice acting. Lots of it's good, lots of it isn't. The Saxons are plagued by an over-enthused middle-class British accent that manages somehow to both oversell every line and sound like they don't sincerely believe a single thing they're saying.
I must void my bladder, Eivor. Then we shall set forth in search of adventures new.
Briston is a romantic, a man with an unquenchable passion for life.
Ready your weapon, or accept your fate as a feast for bears. Ha! You'll fight to the death, worthy one. Ha! Your weapon strikes true.
Energy, but no sincerity. This is the voice of a sales executive whose only genuine interest is flirting with his secretary.
Then let us run wild and free in the woods as the wolves do.
Then there's Randvi, who sounds like his secretary, a Viking queen, wife of the mad Jarl Sigurd, secret lover of Eivor, and she's got nothing.
Married off in service of peace between two clans. A noble and worthy role, but not one I had ever imagined for myself.
Not a drop of passion or feeling.
Until our next moment alone, we should return to our great work. England will not pacify itself on our behalf.
No, indeed.
Back to work then.
It is a simple problem. It is a boring problem. Well, unless you're taking the piss out of it, in which case it's actually very fun. But it is also one of the biggest problems. To whom it happens, they carry with them a false note like a bad smell, and spread it to everything they touch. Randvi's romance is terrible. It's terrible because Randvi is barely a character, because for 99% of the game, the only thing her romance means is the existence of a sex button, which you can press to get a black screen that neither character acknowledges the next morning. This game is longer than the lives of most Fortnite players. Do you know how many conversations you have with Randvi during that time that aren't cursory remarks about the next alliance? One. At the end. And it isn't good. Throw in her voice to that mix. Do you know what you get?
I do not know how to say it any other way.
Then do not say it. Show me. I am a quick study.
Something that sounds like hyperbole but isn't. This is the least convincing romance I have ever seen in a game of this budget. And it matters that Bearston sounds that way, and Hundwald too, because to care about Essex and Lincolnshire, I have to care about them. And the writing made it so I did, but not as much as I would have if the way they sounded didn't drive a distance between us. The fact that Valhalla was too big to consistently use motion capture didn't help, because now the way they sound is the only way they can seem like anything. But the worst part is the bugs. If you lathered a homeless man's balls in PVA glue and ran them across the floor of a public toilet, his balls would be more polished than Valhalla. Would you like a sample? Here's my horse clipping into a cutscene. Here's my horse failing to pass through an open road. Here's my horse failing to respond to controls. Here's me failing to get on my horse. I've got Hjor running into a wall, then disappearing in front of me, lighting breaking in a cutscene, people screaming and running away when it ends, while others continue to dance to music that isn't there. Hair and beards will clip through clothes, mouths will forget to move, and enemies will forget to fight in siege battles. To some degree in all of them, the height of an Arc's drama. Check out these guys setting themselves on fire. That's your sample. Your average day. If it was a list, this video would be longer than the game. So the immersion dies, stakes and tension with it. That's the basic cost. But it can go so far as to change the way a scene reads. Grigori makes a speech to the merchants of Jorvik, but the sound design's either broken or forgotten. So normal market sounds continue to play, creating the impression that no one's listening. You're involved, and then you're not. Yanked from closeness to distance in a relentless cycle that spans from the start of the game to the end. And it certainly doesn't kill the game, but it does diminish it. The story is better better than what Valhalla allows it to be. But what's it like when it isn't broken? At the center of the story is Eivor, Sigurd, and Basim. Sigurd is heir of the Raven clan, but he longs for a life of adventure. He sees things, visions, and voices that have made him believe that he must grow far beyond his small Viking life in the stony fangs of Norway. He must see the whole world. The whole world would know of him. It's fate. On his travels, Sigurd met Basim, a curious stranger from a distant place, a mind as foreign as his voice, a wisdom far beyond his age. Basim has lived the life Sigurd wants, and Basim thinks that living like him is exactly what Sigurd should do. This provides a compelling dynamic with Eivor's smaller ambitions. Revenge on the brute Kjotve. Eivor worries for Sigurd's grandiose self-belief, and he harbors a slight suspicion for Basim, but he is also fascinated by him, his open mind, his passion in spite of his godlessness. They have much to learn from each other. The story places its central fixation on Sigurd's ascent, and so at the core then, that these three men orbit, is a theme of destiny. But there is also another theme, of Viking culture, explored through Eivor's relationship to his father Varin, who died a coward while Eivor was still a child, axe out of hand in the hopes that Kjotve the Cruel would spare his clan. Eivor hated his father for that. The dishonor, the stain. As Sigurd comes to hate his father, the Raven clan's king Styrbjorn, for surrendering their clan's independence to the unifier King Harald. Both men are faced with the question that their hatred and their shame might be misplaced. These themes, these characters, well sketched, well written, well voiced, this place, its mystical atmosphere, a swift plot in a thickening layer of mysteries, of intentions, of prophecies, make your time in Norway slap. It's a great introduction. It does have one problem though. It stumbles just before the finish line. What drives the Raven clan to England is Sigurd's outrage at his father's surrender. It's a Viking thing, more a matter of pride and honor than Sigurd's unique obsession with destiny. That's weak, because it reduces the focus on what makes Sigurd Sigurd. There's no reason to believe that Gorm or Gunnar wouldn't have made the same choice in Sigurd's place. It's also weak because it makes two themes relevant at once, which reduces the focus on either. But mostly, it's weak because it ignores Eivor. We kill Kjotve, and that was the main thing Eivor wanted. The only thing pulling us to England is that Sigurd's going. Norway is a good story, but it's meant to move us into the big story, and it doesn't do that very well. The big story is organized something like a season of TV. Arcs are like episodes, each one associated with a region of England and each being an attempt to establish an alliance with the Raven clan. Valhalla continues to be a well-written game, in part because it's populated with good characters. Nearly everyone is sketched with a central conflict, something they want that they do not have. To be a warrior in a time of politics, to be yourself when you're expected to be a leader, to be a leader when you lack the strength, and they speak to their complexity. Most of Valhalla's story is talking, so it's a good thing that Valhalla is a well-spoken game. Characters have wit, some speak beautifully, and most speak with layers, a depth of thought and emotion revealed by subtext, by what they don't say, what they avoid talking about, to what and when the subject changes. Valhalla is a well-written game. Consistently, the weak link is Eivor. The usual suspect for a weak main character in a Ubisoft game is that the order of the chapters of narrative is not certain, because that means anything that connects those stories, such as the main character, is unallowed to change, lest it not make sense from one of however many possible sequences. Eivor has to stay still, and he does. Next to nothing happens with this character, for 80 hours. That's boring. Now, what can make a static main character work is a strong motivation. But Kjotve is dead, Eivor's shame is all but gone, and there's nothing else there. Nothing besides a fairly common and impersonal sense of duty to Sigurd and the Raven clan. Eivor's not looking for something. He's not wounded, he has no need. He's just doing his job. That's boring. It's also not believable. Given the scale of what Eivor will do in England, the pacification of its every hold and kingdom, a motivation such as that just doesn't fit. It's not human. Which leads me on to a third problem. Eivor doesn't feel like a real person. He moves through England as though a machine, capable of everything at the cost of nothing. He never tires, he never breaks, he never questions himself for anything he knows. To every problem, moral, personal, or practical, he has an answer, filled with wisdom. Nothing challenges him. That is also boring. People like things and dislike things. People have immaturities and insecurities, fears. People are tired and vulnerable. Not Eivor. Does he enjoy Orlog? Does he miss the Northern Lights? We are so rarely allowed to see him outside of a pragmatic light. And he doesn't have Cassandra or Bayek's charm to save him. Eivor is a Viking image of statuesque perfection, and he's cold in that way. For the narrative, it's no insignificant wound, but Eivor is lucky to be surrounded by his betters. Everyone else gets their arc, strung across a smartly shaped 2 to 3 hour plot, long enough for a defined beginning, middle and end, for battles, plot twists and quiet moments, and for most characters to breathe, but no longer. Valhalla is not short, but its regional arcs are concise. The narrative will not often hit an uninteresting or unimportant beat. Not often will there be no sense of narrative momentum. Not often, but sometimes. Valhalla is at its most frustrating when it's spending its time in the wrong place. What matters most about any of Valhalla's stories is that you care about its central characters, and you do. Usually, but it's what matters most, so why is it that Valhalla so often stops expanding upon them at the bare minimum? The reason Nottinghamshire is mediocre instead of great is because we don't care enough about Vili or Tryggve, the two candidates for the future of the clan. So then why in this arc are we tasked for half an hour with calming funeral guests without the company of either of them? When a region has a big problem, this is usually it. Don't care enough about Hjör or Lafina. Don't care enough about Rollo or Briston. Valhalla is 80 hours long, but because its attention is split so many ways, it somehow suffers for its people starving for time. Valhalla is littered with characters who are fine but not good, or good but not great, who should have been more, or who just could have been. And why aren't they? Eventually, you start to question the basic premises of Valhalla's narrative structure. 16 3-hour stories? Why? Why not 10 4-hour stories, where every character had time to resonate and we could care about the minor ones too? Another idea. Valhalla's stories are usually disconnected from one another, but what if they were usually not? What if characters could return and continue to evolve, like Ivar and Ceolbert do? But the simplest argument against 16 3-hour plots is that it leads to repetition. One of Valhalla's worst ideas was that every chapter of its narrative would concern a future alliance, because that massively limits potential for variation of subject or theme. None can be without elder men or kings. None can be without a war of some kind, because there must be fighting, because this is Valhalla, and that fight must be within a political context. And there had to be 16 of them. It kinda runs out of ideas. 3 times must a Saxon lord be convinced to stop being such a muppet. 3 times must a city be relieved of a Templar infestation, and 3 kings must be deposed. What I'm saying is, what if there was only one Saxon lord to be discouraged of his muppetry? Because to feel that you're retreading old ground, especially when a game is dragging on, can make a good thing feel arduous. Good content can be diminished by context. Keep that idea in mind. I'd like to expand on Ravensthorpe, home of the Raven clan, and therefore the thing that matters the most of all the things that matter most, for protecting it in a splintered England is what motivates Eivor to do politics 16 times over. Unfortunately, it's kind of a shit motive. Firstly, because the bulk of Valhalla isn't interested in the Raven clan. It's interested in the part where you do politics 16 times over. Stories are not told here, not with these characters, not beyond a small handful of decent side quests. And that's why I can be halfway into the game with half the people here still feeling like strangers. Dag is still a one-dimensional thug. Randvi's had nothing to say since her passionless romance began. I hardly know the others' names. The simple answer would have been to think like Red Dead 2. Characters from the camp would come with you into chapters, be as central there as those you there meet. Ravensthorpe has the look of a home, and the sound of one too. Sarah Schachner beautifully plays all the notes of warmth and sympathy. But Valhalla does an exceptionally poor job of giving the place a genuine narrative power, the kind of power that would make it feel like a home. You arrive in England, within moments you stumble upon an abandoned longhouse and you think, yeah, that'll do. And that's Ravensthorpe. The first decent clearing you run into. The clan never had a chance to be rootless, much less to be in danger. And so Ravensthorpe never had a chance to save you. There's nothing to emotionally connect you to the place. And outside it, there's very little to legitimize the notion that England would be a dangerous place for Ravensthorpe to be, which, I don't need to remind you, is literally the premise on which the entire game is built. Where is the danger? A wolf? 3 Saxons in a hovel? The lands close to Ravensthorpe are calm and peaceful. The story does nothing to suggest otherwise. The first 2 regional arcs are both about Vikings and Viking lands, and for the first 10 hours, Saxons feel like tourists in their own country. You know that somewhere there are armies, that Alfred is king, but these are not realities until the game is almost finished. And at no point in the entire game, with only a single minor exception, is the security of Ravensthorpe in tension. You could call that a problem. This is supposed to be the reason for everything you do. Another problem is the impact of gaining alliances. Presumably, each one makes you more secure, but you'll never be able to tell. You will gain no soldiers, no resources, no people. You will return to Randvi, still standing in the same room by herself, uselessly staring at a map. and she'll hit you with a 1 or 2 line congratulatory response before sending your ass onto the next alliance. What the fuck? I want to be excited to bring back the good news. Randvi, guess what I've done? But she's talking to me like the automated check-in desk at Heathrow. It borders on reading as intentionally dismissive. Isn't she meant to be in love with you? What happened? Did she leave me for someone who better matches her vibe, like the table she keeps staring at? Valhalla is based on the idea that you do what you do for Ravensthorpe. But Ravensthorpe doesn't give a shit. It's like being a tier 3 sub for a VTuber. Do you see what I mean about how good content can be diminished by context? In this case, by making your efforts feel small and insignificant. And that's about to get so much worse. The Alliance map. That's the sheet on top of Randvi's new boyfriend. It's basically your mission select screen, and it's a really bad idea, because it makes you permanently aware, in the form of what is basically a graph, of just how much content there is ahead of you, and that whatever you're doing is a small fraction of a larger whole. Think of how this affects your perspective. East Anglia is the next alliance, but I'm aware that my project is to complete the Alliance map. East Anglia is 7% of the Alliance map. East Anglia feels small, and so laying across the entire game is a blanket of needless insignificance, a certainty that you will face the campaign as a monumental task to be slowly chipped at. Then think of how this affects your decision making. You have a monumental task ahead of you. Can you really afford to be doing anything else? There's only a handful of conventional side quests in Valhalla, but there is also hours of narrative in Asgard, Jotunheim and Niflheim, and there is an entire country to explore for its own sake, and there is France and Ireland, and Svartalfheim with DLC. When the time came to choose what to do next, so rarely was the thing I chose what I was most interested in. It was what I felt I really ought to be doing, which was almost always the next alliance. To do something non-mandatory would seem wasteful, as if it would incur a debt to a future me who would regret that wasted time. I had begun to think like a marathon runner. I could take a detour, see the sights, but I should probably spend my energy where it matters and take the most efficient route. The upside was that this intensifying sense of should helped to weaken the hold the compass had on me, but the deeper problem was unchanged. The drowning out of want to, the reign of ought to, viewing the game like a job instead of an adventure. This is one of the biggest problems with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. But enough of this one-of business, let's talk about number 1. It begins with basic logic. The more alliances you have, the less significant the next one is going to feel. There are 16 alliances. Uh-oh. So the question you're going to encounter is, why are we still doing this? 0 to 1, that makes narrative sense. 7 to 8, what's the point? How am I supposed to believe that's made us significantly more secure? The problem is only furthered by Eivor's lack of strong personal motivation. The more alliances we gain, the weaker the impulse of duty becomes, and with nothing else to push him forward, you end up with a character whose only clear motive is the fact that there's nothing better to do. Then comes the nuance. At the start of the game, and for a period in the middle, the central plotline with Sigurd and Basim is entwined with the regional arcs, but for most of the game, including the entire second half, it's completely disentangled. After Sussex, Sigurd is rescued from his maddening captivity. He returns to the Raven clan a broken man, deluded and rageful, while Basim silently paces Ravensthorpe and the people fear for the mind of their Jarl. You could call that a pressing matter, but the next time this plotline moves will probably be 6 arcs from now. 15 hours, a gap that is longer than the length of the classic games. Not only does that harm Sigurd's plotline by inserting so colossal a distance in time that it is almost impossible to still care when it's done, you've also given the question of why we're still doing this 12-inch fangs. The Raven clan is politically secure and Sigurd is losing his mind. So why in the fuck are we leaving him to seek an alliance with Lincolnshire? What's pushing Eivor outward? Lincolnshire is great, but it feels like a waste of time. Another long and pointless delay between you and closure. In removing the bulk of its narrative content from the faintest sense of significance, Valhalla makes its main story feel more like a collection of side quests, or in other terms, it makes it feel like you're forced to complete all the side quests to finish the main story. Some say the obvious solution would have been to make the pointless regions optional, but surely the better way would have been not to make them pointless. It doesn't matter that they're mostly good. It was repetitive, it was pointless, and it was longer than Assassin's Creed 2. I could have quit. I came so close. That is context diminishing good content. that is the biggest problem with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Its campaign and narrative are built on a foundation of swampy mud and splintered wood. It rots, it sinks, and for many, it will drown. I have never before seen a game manage its time this poorly. So then, it probably won't be a surprise to tell you that the need to uphold an 80-hour experience puts the gameplay under incredible stress. Combat at 70 hours, or 3.5 mirages, is a different conversation to combat at 1 mirage. Ubisoft do have a few tricks up their sleeves to keep the blood pumping. 2 weapons at the same time, where each weapon has a unique move when it's used in your offhand, lots of weapons have unique movesets when paired with another of the same type, and perks can powerfully synergize too. My spear, for instance, strikes lightning every 3 hits, so I pair it with a sickle, whose offhand move can do 3 hits really quickly. And to experiment this way was a consistently refreshing thing. There aren't that many weapons with interesting perks, but there are lots of attacks to play with. Another life-lengthening feature is well hidden amongst this colossal fucking nebula of skills that Valhalla calls a skill tree. Most skills are useful, but few of them significantly increase the combat's depth. One that does is missile reversal. It's basically a ranged parry. Fuck your crossbow. Fuck your boulder. On the fantasy level, it's crack, as you can see. And it's fantastic for the gameplay too, firstly because it rewards you for expanding your awareness to every active enemy, not just those in melee range. And secondly, because it's a new source of timing challenges, at a point where parries have long since been mastered. At 3.5 mirages, missile reversal was worth its weight in gold. Unfortunately, that's it. And against the brunt of another 40 hours, it's like trying to stop Tom Brady with a 10-year-old. This is a combat system primarily focused on dodges and parries, and Valhalla doesn't have 80 hours worth of ways to test those skills. There are lots of enemies, but there aren't enough enemies. The combat will become a known quantity. Enemies who restrict the player's options will become the most frustrating simply because they limit the potential for combat to be varied, and they will be joined by enemies who have the most frustrating stun attacks. Each enemy type has 1 stun attack animation. 80 hours of the same animation can be tiring enough on enemies with short animations, but some enemies have long animations, like most tough enemies, and tough enemies always play their stun attack animation when killed, even if they were killed with conventional attacks. Half of the fight against a banneret can be watching Eivor kill him for you. Valhalla is so long that for this reason alone, the banneret became my least favorite fight in the game. Depth isn't an important part of the 4 Mirages mindset. All that mattered to me by then was the capacity of combat to be different. I didn't dread it. To the contrary, I never got tired of the crunch of it all, but it had become more like noise than substance. Valhalla doesn't know how to be 80 hours long. There isn't enough mission variety. It tries, on the scarcest occasions, a race, an investigation, something so sweet as a tailing mission, but it doesn't try hard enough. There isn't enough change in the shape of its rhythms either. When most encounter spaces are medium-sized forts, infiltrating a massive fucking castle with a keep, a cavern harbor, and multiple outposts is refreshing for the simple reason that it's big, that the size of things has changed. But that happens twice, in 80 hours. Perhaps it was not such a wise idea to deliberately discourage stealth, to deny Valhalla the breadth of gameplay we enjoyed in games a fraction of the size. Valhalla doesn't know how to be 80 hours long. So let's be the change we seek. Let's ascend to godhood by taking hard drugs. First things first, ascending to Asgard is one of the most moving pieces Sarah Schachner has ever composed for Assassin's Creed. But unfortunately, it's cut off before it gets to the good part. So what was the fucking point? Looks good though, which as you can probably tell, is something of an understatement. It is regal but not boastful in all but its central tower. Home to Odin's lonely throne, a testament to his arrogance. Its structures wind in tune with the natural terrain. It seeks not to be separate from the land, but to be a part of it. A testament to Asgardian culture. The palette chooses colors of lasting strength. The dark green of winter trees and touches it with a magic of blue. It's made dreamlike by a subtle smear. It is the Norse image blended with something other, a note of the alien, which makes it feel real, not merely a projection of a lowly earthling. It's beautiful and fascinating and convincing. It's Asgard. Because Asgard is alien, I found myself liking world events again. It's so much easier to be bold here without resorting to self-deprecating humor. And what's bold is always new, which makes it a kind of lesson, a window into the world. Unfortunately, the rest of the overworld is littered with checklist slop. More so, in fact, than any other place in the entire game. Ymir's tear stones. There are 30 of them. So many that you'll believe they're important. Can nothing be sacred? Not even the throne of the gods? In this way, Ubisoft design against the player interacting with Asgard as the place they themselves want you to believe it is. The Asgardians might be keepers of nature, but you're supposed to view it as yet another bush to be plucked. They're shit berries too. You'll never find out what they're for. Not until you've collected them all and received some skill points. Wonderful, because what they're actually for is the time you spent collecting them. And of course, puzzles. There's even a new idea, but the philosophy is the same. It takes 3 seconds to solve and 60 seconds to execute, but then you finish it and you step outside to that, and the music kicks in. I'm starting to believe that beauty is value enough alone, that it shouldn't need to justify itself as the paintwork for some other kind of content. And I'm starting to see the tragedy it is that Ubisoft disagree. At their best, they are at their worst. That right there is a portrait whose name is Ubisoft. It's actually a landscape, but that didn't sound as good. Anyway, the story. You're Odin. Refreshing both simply because it is different, but also because it's refreshing to play as a bastard. Odin is decisive and wise, but he is also arrogant and self-centered, told of a doomed fate by the Nornir that he is determined to defy, both to escape his death, but as much as a matter of pride. What is fate to instruct the All-Father? It's refreshing to play as a character who still has something to show you. The plot in Asgard moves swiftly, lifted by a layered weave of mysteries and tensions simmering. A political strife with the Jotun, Loki, who's gotta be scheming on account of being Loki, a mysterious builder who would shield Asgard in exchange for Freya's hand in marriage, and signs of this dreaded prophecy. Every wolf might be the one who grows to kill Odin. That's where the character drama kicks into gear. One of the wolves is Loki's son, Fenrir. Now, I don't really know how he's done that, but he's not especially pleased with Odin sparking out his toddler, so Odin has a choice to make. He will not kill the wolf, but he will make it a prisoner for life. Loki's protest be damned. Is that really any better? And he will make a choice like that again. Freya's hand in marriage for the builder, Tyr's arm for a chance to bind Fenrir, Gunnloda's heart for access to the magic that will deliver him from death. Sound dramatic concepts, but the problem with all of them, except for Gunnloda, is that swept up in the gust of a quick plot, Asgard forgets to expand upon its characters. They've got their personalities, not that their bafflingly flat character designs would suggest as much, but you'll never understand who they are. There's not something they want that they do not have, beyond the obvious of, don't kill my son? The plot and the art will continue to make Odin's line entertaining, even into Jotunheim, the white blanketed cradle of illusory magic, where the deers may be warriors and what's empty might be full. Their bodies disintegrate and their blood sprouts grass, their city labored by thralls taken from Asgard. But these are the ways of war and Odin doesn't object. It's a fascinating place, but Loki's part in it, boss fight included, continues to ring hollow. His voice actor doesn't help. As Basim, an assassin with an undercurrent of devilish intent, he works. But he's not so convincing when the devilish intent comes first.
They knew what he was and knew what he would become. Just as you do.
Or when the emotion's running high.
The game is not over. The game is never over!
It sounds like he's trying too hard. It also sounds like he's been smoking a pack a day.
Release him, Harvey. Release Fenrir, or I swear I will kill you here and now.
He doesn't sound capable of charm or trickery. He doesn't sound like Loki. But Odin gets what he wants, a path for his soul into a distant future. But first, he returns to Asgard to bind Fenrir in an unbreakable chain. Unfortunately, this is where Ubisoft ran out of money. Most development studios would find some more money, or release a patch after the game had released and made all that money. But Valhalla says, fuck it, and maintains a boss fight so profoundly unpolished that it makes the aforementioned homeless man's scrotum look like a pair of marbles. You will miss, and you won't know why. He will miss, and you won't know why. His bite attack doesn't even target the same realm you're in. His leap attack can phase through you. Sometimes he buries himself and tries to hit you with the Shai Hulud special, but when he pops out, he is completely immune to damage until his recovery animation finishes. So you just have to stand there, waiting like a plum, 15 times a fight. But the funny thing is, you'll be hoping that happens, because you can also get stuck underground, loop in circles forever, which forces you to quit out of the game and restart the entire fight. And also watch Ubisoft spend 30 seconds checking for add-ons as if I might have purchased DLC on my second monitor mid-session. This happened to me several times, costing me 10 minutes a pop, because that's how long his health bar is, and his attacks can one-shot. Not the best thing in a fight this broken. It's hard to get hit, but one mistake in 10 minutes on your part of the game's, and it's back to the start. So I spent an hour fighting a boss I mastered in 3 minutes. I could search my mind for a memory of a worse experience in Assassin's Creed, but I know for a fact that I have never felt so distinctly insulted. And on that note, Asgard is done. Whatever biblical catastrophe befell Ubisoft to have them release Fenrir like this, also denied the Asgard plot a decent end. The Aesir, most of whom were betrayed by their king, wordlessly accept and join his flight from fate, and we watch Ragnarok come as implication in a cutscene. A beautiful cutscene, but not the meat that was needed. And yet, somehow, the bigger problem is that you're not that likely to see it. You're not that likely to do Asgard, because it's non-mandatory, and because you're never told that it's not a side story, in the sense that if you don't do it, you won't understand Sigurd and Basim's ending. Nice one, Valhalla. Genuinely don't think it could have had a worse structure if it tried. So here's the deal. Basically, everything we just saw was Eivor's pea-brain Nordic interpretation of his own memories as Odin. He is Odin, and Odin was an Isu scientist, and everything that just happened in the Silver Past. The World Tree was a machine named Yggdrasil that would encode his mind and form into the human genome to allow him and the Aesir scientists to escape the Great Catastrophe, their Ragnarok. That's why Sigurd is losing his mind. He is the Isu Tyr, known to the Norse as their god of war, reincarnated as a man remembering a past life that he cannot understand. Is he haunted? Is he mad? Is he chosen? Basim, the awakened Loki, guides Sigurd towards remembrance. Is he Odin, the monster he scoured the earth in search of? Now, you might be thinking, it seems fairly obvious that Sigurd's not Odin on account of looking like Tyr and sounding like Tyr, and having a best mate who seems the far better candidate on account of looking like Odin and sounding like Odin, and having a pet raven which he uses to see things, which would make Eivor seem fairly suspect even if you don't look like Odin because you're playing as a woman. But according to Basim, he got them mixed up because he was blinded by the sun. Oh, yeah, blinded by the sun. I hate it when that happens. Anyway, aside from the fact that it doesn't make sense, the problems with Asgard become the problems with the main story, either because I haven't done it, or because I just don't have that much investment in what drives Basim forward. The further problem is that Eivor and Sigurd aren't invested either. Unlike Basim, Eivor is very much not integrated with the persona of Odin, and so you end up with a fight sorely lacking in dramatic weight because the target of Basim's revenge isn't here, and Eivor's just confused.
My son, Eivor! This is about my son!
You speak nonsense, Basim.
We win, but where's the resolution in that? Odin's relationship status is a little more complicated. For Eivor, his mind is a devil on the shoulder, a whisperer twisting Eivor towards the old ways, when strength made kings and all else bowed. To receive these perspectives is often a fascinating thing, but this is no Talion and Celebrimbor. Odin speaks in memory corridors and select conversations, and nowhere else. Once every several hours, his relationship with Eivor doesn't develop or deepen throughout, instead remaining at repeating the same basic exchange. Ah, I see you have a decision, Eivor. Choose the harshest one. It doesn't even achieve the low bar of convincingly being a relationship. Why is he there so rarely? Why does Eivor seem so unbothered about the fact that he's there at all? I'm just saying, if God was following me around like a lost puppy, it would probably take me more than 10 seconds to get used to it. There is no tension here, no emotion, because Valhalla has once again spent its impossibly vast wealth of time everywhere except where it matters. This is a central thread, and it comes to an end in the very heavens. Sigurd has remembered something. A paradise buried deep in the snow. His destiny. Maybe yours too. Eivor would follow Sigurd anywhere, but this feels like madness. If he's wrong, you won't make it back. Not from a storm like this. Eivor's tension between trust and doubt in Sigurd, and the anticipation of what you'll find, makes for an excellent build-up. To the machine, Yggdrasil, to Eivor and Sigurd, validation of everything they ever believed. The gods were real, they were waiting in the snow, and of course they'd believe it. That's not an earthly tree. But where they marvel and wonder, the player knows the disappointingly simple truth, and that contrast creates a further dread. Sigurd knows the machine as if he'd been here before, and you're both accepted into an image of Valhalla. You feast and fight in a golden paradise. You live the same day of glory again and again. But something isn't right. The arm Sigurd lost in Sussex is lost again in the endless battle. Every battle, as every time you rush in, spurred by Sigurd's delight and fight without aim, only to see him in the corner of your eye, kneeling, clasping his irrepressible wound. It is a truth inescapable, that his earthly life will always remain, that an escape is all this is. It is a point made beautifully, because it used well an interactive and cinematic language instead of just saying it. Eivor comes to understand what Sigurd refuses to. He is surrounded by comforts which he knows to be lies. His loved ones are but shadows, and no matter how warm it may feel, that lie isn't enough for him. And he realizes something. that to feast and fight forever is no heaven at all. This isn't the life he wants. But Odin does, so he fights to prevent you from leaving. There are two ways you can view what happens next. First, Odin as a plainly Norse Odin. Second, Odin as the mind of an Isu scientist named Odin. In the first conception, we can understand this as the incarnation of Viking beliefs, blood, battle, honor, fighting against Eivor's apostasy, his rejection of those things as the highest values. Indeed, to beat Odin, you have to unequip your axe, physically reject the Viking way. It's smart, but the problem is obvious. This conflict has no power, because for the previous eon of narrative, the Viking theme, the one explored with fathers, honor and shame all that time ago, was silent. Since then, Eivor has expressed not even the slightest quiver of doubt about his nature. Why would he? It won him England and cost him nothing, and Odin was little more than a whisperer of pointless cruelties on the rare occasions he could be bothered to appear. The second view is a little more complicated, because it's difficult to view this Odin as the mind of an Isu scientist reborn in human flesh. What's the plan, big man? Step 1, sometimes convince Eivor to be a prick. Step 2, we're meant to stay in Valhalla because... And what's the goal? I guess Odin wants to take the wheel, but there's almost nothing that actually serves to indicate that. Surely he would urge you to follow Sigurd's path. And he does, once. Surely he would recognize the face of Tyr or Basim as Loki, or perhaps stop pretending to be an actual Norse god, because that clearly isn't working. Or maybe he's not pretending, maybe he's not that aware. Maybe he actually thinks he is a Norse god. I don't know, which is really the point. Who's who wants what? With those questions unanswered, I find myself distant from the drama of the fight, which is a shame because this is one of the best cutscenes in the history of Assassin's Creed. Jesper Kid's leaving Valhalla is at once sorrowful and empowering. The imagery so beautifully represents Eivor's choice, the closing door between a life of love, his friend's arms outstretched, his long dead father and mother remembered to welcome their son from the Viking darkness, as Eivor forgets his confident, brutish gait, falls into their arms, and Odin's desperate taunts turn to pleading. The performances on these last lines are so good that I sometimes come back to this scene just to hear it again.
With me, have wisdom, glory, power. What more do you need?
Everything else.
It's truly moving, but only for as long as the cutscene lasts, because this isn't the ending to a story Valhalla told. It's the ending to some other idea, something else the game somehow didn't have enough time for, and now it comes back to Sigurd, who does not confront the fact that he still doesn't know who he is, why he's like this, or that his destiny led him not to becoming a great man, but to an incomprehensible machine that should make him question everything he's ever believed, further stressing a fractured mind. Instead, he calls Eivor a twat for betraying him, for instance, by stealing his girl. To be honest, that is fair. But we also followed him into certain death on faith alone and just saved his life from Basim. Precisely now is when this accusation of betrayal is at its weakest. It's confusing, it's contrived, and it wouldn't be if it was characterized as the result of madness. But in fact, the scene communicates that Sigurd's mind has settled. He admits that he isn't the man he was. He will start anew or return to Ravensthorpe and step down from his place as Jarl. I see scraps of meaning littered across the ground. Valhalla as a criticism of escapism. Perhaps that the expectation of everlasting paradise allows men to live like beasts in their time on Earth. Sigurd's message is more clear. To believe that destiny will bring you the life you want is to walk a path of madness toward a bitter, hollow end. The ability to send a message is disarmed somewhat by the fact that Sigurd's madness is revealed to be caused by a sci-fi plot device instead of something with a human origin, and ultimately, it could only land as well as this scene does, which is to say, fine. Now guess who's getting the Raven Crown? It's a vaguely affirming thing. It's the warmth an ending wants. But Eivor never wanted to be Jarl. Leadership or anything meant by leadership was no part of Eivor's character. Valhalla has the shape and sound of an ending, but none of the heart. Basim returns in the modern day as Layla dutifully follows the digitized instructions of the world's least trustworthy man, getting herself stuck in Valhalla with a figure that talks like Desmond. It is the coolest thing that's happened with the modern day since Assassin's Creed 3, but that's it. It's cool. I needed more than a cool idea. I was owed some fucking feeling after all this time. But the modern day is another of Valhalla's underwritten stories, and it took far too long to get here, because there are so many of them, and there are so many stories like this, of games worthy of Ubisoft's talents, and so undeserving of their pathological self-sabotage. I wondered, having finally done it, if I regretted it all this damn time. But before I could come to an answer, I realized that I hadn't done it at all. because that wasn't the ending. It was one of them.
The game is not over. The game is never over.
Alfred is still king, and Guthrum's great heathen army gathers in Wessex to face him. Valka warns Eivor not to go. She sees a horror sweeping across the land if he leaves them now. But honor and blood and all that, so he goes and barks threats at Alfred and butchers a village of his men as revenge. This is the most Viking we ever see from Eivor, and it happens immediately after an ending that saw him leave that life, screaming in the darkness. It's not a problem because it doesn't make sense. It's a problem because it's narratively mistimed, severely, in such a way that makes the ending feel like it meant nothing. And it wasn't worth it. The arc fucking sucks. This great war is invisible. Our part in it is 2 small battles, before an attempt at climax utterly undermined by being outrageously fucking stupid. Alfred's holding a feast. The plan's an ambush, but you organize your ambush so close to the building in question that they could probably hear you fart. Does no one think this is a trap? And you call on your allies, but they don't bring their armies. They bring themselves. Something of a disappointment, what with half of them being untrained Saxon imbeciles. And would you believe it? One of them dies. Because would you believe it? It was a trap. It is then implied that Guthrum beat Alfred's army. Off-screen. Off happens to be the direction in which all this can fuck. And then the two of you speak of Valhalla. Eivor no longer believes in life after death, but Guthrum holds a hope for an afterlife of peace and quiet, an escape from all this endless, cruel pursuit. Eivor tells him that the afterlife men wish for is a reflection of their regrets in this one. So the ending did happen, just didn't actually make him act according to his words. It is a beautiful and thoughtful exchange. Valhalla is in no shortage of things like that, but it's strapped to the arse end of a boring, witless mess. Because of course, the climax to the War for England was less deserving of Ubisoft's attention than any one of the 16 mostly pointless regional arcs. What it isn't, though, is the end. No, there's another ending, which you will get when you kill every single Templar in England. The game is not over. The game is never over. Splish. Life would be so much easier if you could just turn into a fish. Okay. The basic premise of the order menu is strong. Conspirators hidden in shadow, each one requiring a series of clues to unveil. Kill one, he may hold the first clue for the next one, and it'll be vague. It'll say he was spotted in a tower northeast of Beanstown and south of River Toast. So there's a light element of world-based puzzle solving, as you place markers in likely spots, then fast travel over and search the landscape for anything that fits the description. It's a fresh kind of puzzling. But what really makes it work is this sense of retracing a target's steps, of tracking, hunting, fulfilling the role of the assassin. Problem is, it doesn't work for long enough. It's 50 times in a row. Even the Loki meme where he says, "It's never over," and turns into a fish wouldn't be fun 50 times in a row. Valhalla is as ever suffocated under its own weight. The other problem is, if we're being honest, it probably wouldn't be fun enough to last 5 times in a row. It's mostly traveling. There's no detective work to be done with the clues, you're told what to do. And even for the targets whose characteristics are listed like in Guess Who, it's not a real puzzle. The perceptive player couldn't solve them without all of the clues. Then you get there. You press the assassinate button on an unguarded target. It's got enough meat for once or twice on scattered occasions, but not like this, not even nearly. To make matters worse, these Templar hunts are also burdened with the same sense of insignificance as the regional arcs. What are the Templars doing to England? I don't really know. Why should we care? Well, because Basim's protege Hytham told you that assassins like freedom and Templars don't about 70 hours ago, and I guess that was good enough for Eivor to kill literally every single one of them in the entire country by himself. You collect medallions from the fallen, you return them to Hytham in batches, who thanks you with a short and dry response, his back still turned to the shelves. Not interested, Hytham? The furniture's more important? Randvi, do you have something to tell me? You're expected to kill the Templar zealots too. Roaming boss fights. Decent ones, but in this context of what may be up to 15 of them, I didn't want to fight the next one. I wanted this to be over. I hate Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I love Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I feel something for it, not like Mirage. There's nothing cold here, least of all the winter. But Valhalla is not a loved game. It is a tolerated game, and sometimes a hated game. Because it is not what fans of Assassin's Creed wanted, but among the broader gaming public, it is also hated for being the poster child of Ubisoftian shallowness, the go-to example of what's wrong with AAA gaming, and that I hate the most. Not because they're wrong, but because they should be. I have spent so long talking about Ubisoft games that should have been good. If they had chosen not to abandon their potential, if they had been finished before release, if it were not for greed. But Valhalla is different, because it has no excuse. I don't know why it isn't what it could have been. There are signs of greed in Valhalla, but greed isn't why Valhalla is overstuffed with undercooked stories, why it structures itself into the shape of its own noose. Mainstream appeal didn't fill monasteries with cardboard, or take reward from a game desperate to lavish you. And it wasn't time or budget that made Valhalla forget what kind of a game it would be. Valhalla's failures are purely of design, and they're simple. But Ubisoft aren't actually stupid. This is their best team. This was Ashraf Ismail and Darby McDevitt. So why isn't this game great? Greed would have made it look sane, but it is fitting that their biggest game is the one that best embodies them. It is the most Ubisoft game. Their self-sabotage, never more needless, never more whole than this. Its beauty without end. I love Valhalla, and I fucking hate it. And then it was over. A day of my life wasted wailing numbly at a list, and at last, the father. Alfred. No way. The father was the only important character left who hadn't been concluded on? Wow. But there is one surprise. He's also your informant, the poor fellow soldier of Christ who had been feeding you names from the start. He inherited leadership of the Order, but he hated them, godless and cruel. The assassins would burn them to the ground, and Alfred would remake them in the good image of Christ, from the masks of old to the cross we knew. It is a neat origin story. So Eivor stays his blade. He makes a half-hearted taunt at Alfred's diminished position. But Alfred is a man of God. This is a blessed life, and he still believes in England. Look at it. God's works are wondrous. They cannot be resisted. When Alfred looks at England, he sees what Eivor saw in the Aurora, and he knows that he will be given the strength to defend her, to keep her, to stand with its God. Alfred's conviction is Valka's prophecy, the shadow sweeping England. It is Ubisoft's recognition of what will happen in the years to come. Alfred will recover his strength, the Viking armies will be banished, and England will be united. Eivor stands on the precipice of doom, and yet neither he nor Alfred stare out at an abyss to be or a blood-soaked field in despair for the future. No, they marvel. They share smallness in the face of the magnificence they stand before, and it makes them dream of futures worth fighting for. Because this moment is not about what divides them, these foreign warriors, each other's heathens. It is about what makes them the same. It is about bringing Valhalla's founding war back to its first flame. Buried and blurred by politics, honor, and thronecraft is Earth, our wonderful home, the music it inspires in us. If you didn't quite get it, Valhalla will provide a demonstration. I tried to fast travel when the conversation ended, but for no clear reason, I wasn't allowed. And as I rode away, a song began. I never heard this one before. I realized that I was supposed to listen to it. Its pain, its struggle, its breathless wonder. To hear it here, taking in the forests and rivers of Athelney. Valhalla had made itself clear, and I understood it better than a dialogue could ever spur, because this was always Valhalla's strongest voice. This was always what, if nothing else, made Valhalla special. This was a good place to end. It was ending enough for me. So for the last time, I looked out at England, and I asked myself if I regretted it, and I knew that I didn't. Is it right for the art of a game to be judged in the tight confines of the word presentation, as if it is only meant to present, to be a servant for something else, to be less of substance than the swords or the story? But that can't be true. I know it can't, because I found more of worth in riding to Valhalla's extents than I found anywhere else in Valhalla, than I have in the whole of many games. I saw notes of character that existed in no other terms but these, in the language of mud and melody. I felt closer to their hope and their passion and their love and their fear and their long-forgotten gods. It made me interested in the time period. It made me want to take a walk. It helped me to remember the love I have for my own world, and you're telling me that's presentation? No. That is the one thing Assassin's Creed never lost about itself. It disappointed me that Valhalla's beauty had to stand alone as its one shining strength, but it doesn't disappoint me now that it was its beauty that did. I hated this game, but I wouldn't take it back, because it really did fill my heart. And I still believe all the things they say about Valhalla, that all of them are true. I'd just like to add that one caveat. Special thanks go out to El Hudson, Andre Baltuta, Holy Shift, Dennis Williams, Combat Wombat, John Lamley, Dylan Schaefer-Murphy, The Last Great Opium Den, Have a Nice Day, Dan Walker, Caleb Finnemore, DJ, Week Sentry, Chino, Chase Baker, Saint, Squanch, William Vossler, Joe Simmons, I pay my cam girl so why not you? Arcturus, Save, MT the Poet, Deluxo, Calvin Black, Dr. Pavel, Carlos Skipper, Enzo, John C., Corey Walterbeek, Monochrome Only, Ethan Seach, Pib, Fat Guy 688, Joshua Carr, Purple PP, Joshua Lovejoy, Veda, Cole Brownwood, Essel and Beneful Doggo, Patsy, Lubos Thomas, Whitelight Best Girl, Tentmaster Kafka, New XC, Very Professional Dodo, Douglas Totally Straight Up Anonymous Yo, Mark Carter, Nikita Shoshin, Dog Best Dog, Ayako Locate My Husband Using Your Voice, Nebulous Rascal, Bumble, Grumble, Double, Bumble, Grumble, Bumble, Grumble, Double, Crumble, Bumhole, Pummel, Shovel, Puddle, Hubble, Jumble. Tidewall, L.A. Lockwood, Benna Haig, Fox Hunt, Logan Briggs, Derek Woods, Cami Sama, Note, Dai, Several Babs, Rams, Stephen Francisco Santana, Daryl Tankersley, The Lightweight Whitelight Wait to Light Late Whites, First Try, Hunter McCann, Oh My God Why, 2, and Robert Thompson.